the Pediatric Lounge, a podcast taking you behind the door of the physician's lounge to get a deeper insight into just what docs are talking about today. From the clinically profound to the wonderfully routine and everything in between.
I'm thrilled to start today with some incredible news from the Leadership Conference. Resolution number 29 has passed, with more than 2/3 support from our leadership. I want to give a special thanks to Peter Pogaskar, immediate past president of Rhode Island, AAP, Dr. Jesse Hackle, current chair of the Committee on Workforce, along with our chapter presidents from California, Colorado, and Missouri, and the Executive Committee of Endocrinology for their tireless advocacy. This groundbreaking resolution calls for the AAP to endorse screening guidelines established by ISPAD and ADA. Although not binding on the board, here's why this matters so much. With a simple point-of-care finger prick testing, we can prevent 11,000 cases of DKA at presentation and avoid those devastating PICU admissions. Think about what this means. Thousands of little ones will be spared the trauma of diabetic ketoacidosis and its complications, including cerebral edema and death. Their families will have a much softer landing into managing this disease. But wait, there's more to celebrate as summer winds down, and I cannot believe we're past Labor Day. I have an incredible busy September ahead, and I hope to see some of you along the way. First, I'm heading to my favorite Midwest state for the AAP Michigan Conference, September 19th through the 21st in Traverse City. Please join us. And guess who will be there? Our dear friend and fellow podcaster, Dr. Leah Cagino from the Pediatric Meltdown. Can't wait to catch up with everything about baby George and in between. Then I'm off to Denver on Thursday, September 25th to join the world's premier diabetes researchers and our favorite Dr. Katie Schaefer from Bloom Peds in Michigan for the mini fellowship Prevent the Crisis, a free evidence-based CME program designed to help pediatricians prevent DKA and provide better care for our patients, along with Dr. Kimber Simmons, who will be leading this session. Again, it's free and it has CME and its own bias and it's real evidence-based medicine. I wish we had more of that, and I really do hope that you join us for that one-day mini fellowship. So I hope to see you in Traverse City or Denver. After all, we pediatricians are the best. Now let's dive into today's show. Hello, George. It's Tuesday afternoon, and we're recording an episode with a dear friend of ours and an excellent communicator.
Okay, yes. Welcome, Dr. David Hill, to the Pediatric Lounge podcast. Today, our topic of discussion is communication in an age where people set their hair on fire and trust in public health may be lost. Take it away.
Dr. Hill's a personal friend and colleague who has been the voice of the American Academy of Pediatrics flagship podcast, a husband, a father, pediatrician, and most importantly, a fellow Wrightsville beach bum. He booked the podcast before some troubling news in the public health arena. In fact, there's been so much back and forth in AAP's unprecedented action to release a totally different schedule from the CDC, which I had never seen in my almost 40 years career as a pediatrician. I'm at a loss for words because as we were taping last week with Dr. Paul Offit, he got a text from CNN to book him to talk about this. So the whole thing is just really surreal to me. But welcome back, and it's great to see you, David.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be back. You guys are fantastic. And we are entering an age where we're all just podcasters appearing on each other's podcasts, and I embrace it.
Hey, I see patients. That's why I wear the stethoscope. We would see patients this morning.
Yeah, I just skated in from the hospital to make this podcast, so I'll have all sorts of fresh experiences to share.
Yes.
So I just can't forgive you for leaving Wrightsville Beach.
Man, we already moved to the other side of town over to the Cape Fear River. And the difference between living at the Cape Fear River and living in Seattle, it's really just a matter of degrees, man, once you go west.
One of the biggest regrets I don't have many regrets in life, but one of the biggest regrets I do have, I had the opportunity to buy the pink house at the north end of the island. There's figure 8 back in 1991 for $350,000.
Dude.
And I just chickened out. I was like, I don't know where I'm going to end up living. And in reality, when will I come here? And that was a lot of money back then.
Yeah,
but
it
I
was.
had the money to buy it. I just was like, I should save that money to buy my primary home first. I was responsible, but what a mistaken investment.
You can't know necessarily, but yeah, figure 8's incredible. When we have permission to go on the island, we really enjoy it out there.
So George doesn't know, but figure 8 island is where like mega rich people live. And there's a bridge and it's gated. If you're not invited or a resident, you are not allowed on the island. You can go on the boat around the island and see the beautiful houses, but you can't set foot on the island. It is just in it. But at the beaches, oh my goodness, it's a beautiful place.
So
I need to congratulate you on your move to Seattle and being a full professor there. That's going to be an amazing ride, I think.
yeah, it's really extraordinary. And I feel like it's the culmination of a trend that's been going on for a while. I came out of residency committed to like private practice forever. And if I did anything academic, it'd be cute. Maybe we'd have some students come through. But really, I was just going to be a private practice guy. And over the course of the last 23 years, I've discovered that I am really drawn to teaching, writing, lecturing, being in an academic center and setting where just I feel like I'm surrounded by people who are teaching me at all times. And the opportunity to go to a program as renowned as the one at Seattle Children's and the University of Washington, man, when they called, I was like, I'm going to have to do this. And as you pointed out with your figure 8 island house, sometimes you just take a flyer and make a huge change and take a risk and go, okay, let's do this and see where it goes. And it is a frightening thing to do, to pull up stakes and go to the other side of the country. But I also think the opportunity out there is golden. And I don't want to look at this as the thing I passed up.
Now, remind me, is your wife a nurse?
She's a physician assistant.
Okay.
She is trained specifically in pediatrics from the program at University of Colorado, which was at the time and may still be the only pediatric specialized PA program. So she's been doing something in pediatrics her entire life. Currently, she's doing pediatric mental health. She's actually just on the other side of this door here, seeing patients by telehealth, which is what she's been doing since the beginning of the pandemic. And she loves it. It's incredible. And she can continue to do the same job from the West Coast, but we'll probably also look and see what they have to offer out there and see what she can do.
So this is a little personal. How did you take the news? Because I think she's a native North Carolinian or North Carolinian.
Actually, no. She grew up in Colorado, and then her first 5 years she spent in Portland setting up the fast track at Randall Children's. So she was part of the impetus to do this. She said, I've always loved it in the Pacific Northwest, and we should look at going there. And so she's jumping up and down, man. She could not be more thrilled.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I see the pictures of you and your engagement out in Seattle. I'm like, did he get married when he was 13 years old? And that was a second freaking marriage. I know people are weird in the South, but that's a little too weird.
Yeah, no, man.
What's weird is all that stuff he knows. Is he trolling you or something?
Yeah. You know what? My social media, I do put some things up publicly. And we were very excited. That photograph was from 2012 when we got engaged, actually at an AP meeting, because that's where we do everything. And it was up in Seattle, and we had no idea at that time, these two fresh-faced kids in their young 40s, that we would be returning there for a life. And so I was really tickled to put up that before and after shot of us then and us now.
honestly, you don't look a year over 20 in that picture. It's just, it was just so funny to see you. I know you have to be 20. This is a second marriage, but it's a beautiful picture. I really
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks.
that picture. Now, you also have some news to share about you have been asked to lead a whole book at the IP.
Yeah, so this is super exciting. I have had the privilege of working with my friend and mentor, Dr. Tanya Rimmer Altman, on edition 7 and edition 8 of Caring for Your Baby and Young Child Birth to Age 5, which is, of course, our big sort of brick of a parenting book that tends to be very popular. And it has been incredible to be mentored through 2 editions of this really huge undertaking. And right now, Dr. Altman is interested in pursuing some other engagements. And so she asked if I would take it on as editor in chief. And I was very excited to take on that mantle. And I cannot wait to begin. It is really almost a 5-year process
Oh,
getting
wow.
this book out because it is informed by every council, committee, and section of the Academy. So everything that has changed, every little tweak in language, every new issue that we want to address has to make it into that book. And then it has to get through this phalanx of expert interviewers who are like, well, you said this, do you want to say that? And so it's really a giant communal undertaking. And then we have to give it a voice that is a unified voice so that it sounds like there's one person and not an army of people talking at you. And making that voice friendly and inviting is really a big piece of this job. One thing that Tanya and I did for the 8th edition was we noticed that there was a lot of paternalistic language still in the book through some of the earlier editions. So here's how you should feel. Don't be worried about that. Do be excited about this. And we really felt in this day and age that telling people how to feel just doesn't ring true. It's not my experience. I can tell somebody that this is common and that we as doctors don't find it concerning. But I can't tell them, don't worry. I can tell them this is usually fine, but you're going to feel the way you're going to feel.
So when I sit down, I always sit down on the stool
Yeah.
because the studies say if I sit down, people think I was in the room for 20 minutes.
Yes,
If I stay standing up, they think I was there for 30 seconds and I didn't listen.
exactly.
And when they mean anything like sleeping, the kid's waking up at 3 a.m. and they're 6 months old, I always say, sitting in this chair, the advice is very easy. Don't pick them up.
Yeah.
Laying in bed, when your kid starts screaming and you start sweating bullets, even though only 30 seconds have gone by and you think the world's going to end in the next 15 seconds,
Yeah,
that's a tough part.
exactly.
So I've been there. I've seen the kid cry, but the advice is easy. Actually, it's cheap. It's important, but it's cheap. But doing the hard work, that's tough.
And I love everything you just said about that, George, because you talked about a lot of things that I talk about, which is one, what are you bringing into the room? It's not obvious, but I actually have done some stand-up comedy and some comedy writing. And I got coaching here from a professor of communication who was also an America's Funniest Mom winner. And that's Brooklyn Green. And Brooklyn likes to say in her presentations, the first form of communication, your first form of communication is the energy you bring into the room. What are you bringing in there with you? And when you take that moment to sit, to say, look, I'm not going to stand over you. I'm not going to be this looming presence, especially like I round on newborns all day, every day. And mom's in bed. She's lying down. I'm not that tall. I'm about 5'8", but when you're lying down, I'm tall. And that looming over, let me tell you what I'm going to do, is very uninviting, right? So you do exactly what you're talking about, putting yourself at the patient's level. I'm going to sit with you. I'm not going to loom over you. I'm going to get at your eye level. We're going to talk like peers. We're going to talk like people who are at the same level. We're going to have a conversation. This is not orders. And then the second thing is acknowledging the different experience. I don't have to live your experience right now of waking up in the middle of the night with a screaming baby who seems to need nothing but your attention, right? I'm sitting in this room right now. We're comfortable right here. And I know how easy this sounds for me to say. I know. But then finding that connection of, I have been there. I did have to do that. And I remember it was incredibly hard. And I think those are all ways that we come to where the patient is. I think meeting them where they are, as my old mentor, Todd Blackstone, used to say, come alongside them. You're
Yeah.
not confronting. You're not looking, you're not at them, you're with them. And everything that we can do to be with is really critical right now. So I just love everything you just said there, George.
Well,
But I think I'm George. He's Herb.
Herb,
He wants to be George. He'd love to be George, but I don't think he can be.
we can't all be George, to be fair.
But in
I
medicine,
apologize for that.
I have better looking hair than George does. That's for sure.
Let me
Right.
just say Herb looks curious. And that's where I was going with that.
yeah. In medicine, what you're saying is interesting, but we tend to lecture a lot to people in general. You should do this, you should do that, you should do that. I love the storytelling because I got, unfortunately, way too much experience. And every time I talk about, for example, the MMR vaccine, when I had the measles as an intern and how terrible it was, I always get them to take the MMR without a problem. It's a storytelling.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's
Right. And I love that bit of story. That's one thing that I talk about when we talk about communication is nobody's brain like picks up statistics until you turn them into a story. There's just, I can't imagine what 1,000 people versus 10,000 versus 100,000 people affected by a thing is, what that looks like. But I can imagine a school's worth of children being wiped out. I can imagine a school bus worth of children being affected. I can imagine people the size of my city, size of Wilmington or Wrightsville Beach, being affected. And then I can picture that one person. And when we tell that story, now we're being human. Now we're connecting. It's no longer that one child in 1,000 who gets measles is going to be hospitalized or die. I saw this child. I knew this child. I had the privilege of taking care of a child who had been a victim of meningococcemia very young. And he is still the poster child for the meningococcal vaccine. His parents are very active in the movement of educating people about the importance of preventing meningococcus. And this child lost all 4 extremities and part of his face. That is a lot. And I knew him. And the fact that I knew him, and can I say, he was a spunky guy. He was fun. You know how this goes, George. He was a great kid, full of life. But that's different from meningococcemia strikes X number of people a year. Meningococcemia struck this kid, and I knew him.
Yeah. Yeah. So you must have some very important message you want to share with the audience, because you have a phenomenal podcast it's the flagship podcast of the American Academy of Pediatrics. You have a lot of audience. What is the message you want to share with the audience today that you are so concerned about?
Thank you. I think right now it is how we succeed in a battle of messaging, in a battle of communication. And honestly, the first thing for us to understand is that we're up against some really massive forces. For example, spending on the wellness industry is 3 times the size of spending on the healthcare industry. And one of the things we're seeing is in the wellness industry, you don't have to prove safety and efficacy. You just have to have a story. That's it. Whoever tells the best story is the winner. Oh, I know this person who started using this stuff and they lost a ton of weight and they feel great. That's it. Did anything bad happen to them? No, they're fantastic. They feel 20 years younger. They're running a marathon. Their skin is clear. They've got all this energy. Ah, great. Maybe I should use that product. That's it. Did it go through phase 3 trials? Was there post-market analysis? Did they compare it to placebo? Did they compare it to something else that was already known to work? Did anybody check it for purity and consistency? No, it's just a story. But you can make an enormous amount of money telling those stories if you tell them. And guess what? It costs a lot of money to get FDA approval for something. And if you have a product that's out there on the market that's a real medication or intervention and a bad thing happens, it gets reported. The FDA comes down on you, right? You can't sell it anymore. You have to change it. So there's huge money in that. There is huge political gain. I ran for office last year, and I was the victim of a lot of misinformation. And you know what? My opponent won. And that person won in part by saying things about me that were simply not true, that were demonstrably untrue. But politically, that didn't matter. And part of it had to do with the practice of medicine and the practice of pediatrics. And so there's a lot of political gain to be made. Third, in this day and age of social media, anti-vaxxers, for example, are worth billions of dollars to social media corporations. Why? Because they engage. And that's all a social media company needs. It needs eyeballs. You don't have to agree. You can be furious. You can be sad. You can be delighted. It doesn't matter. You're engaged. They're making money. So that's what we're up against. And it's easy to think we're just a bunch of doctors. What, 67,000 members of the AP? What are we going to do? But part of my message is there's a ton we can do. Because as you said, Herb, you're in the room. You're the one sitting in front of this mother. George, you're the one who knows the story. You lived it. You were there. Each of us is in the room. Each of us is seeing stories every single day. We have trust. And when we despair, it's important to remember that as bad as things seem, over 90% of parents want their kids vaccinated. Over 90% of parents trust their primary care doctor, their pediatrician, as the person who can tell them what's right to do. So we're not coming into this with two hands tied behind our backs. And now it's just a matter of getting even better.
So you've thrown a lot out there, and I see you're very much an optimist, while I am just a cranky pessimist. But
That's sure.
the data is that before the pandemic, and this is very interesting.
Yeah.
So before the pandemic, 70% of the US population trusted their doctor. After Joe Biden, 40% trust their doctor. The Congress is abysmal. I think they're down to 15%. But the bizarre thing is that, and I don't know this statistic for physicians, but when you ask people, do you trust the Congress? 85% say no, they're bums. But then when you say, do you like your congressman? Oh yeah, he's a great guy. And I think that overall, people don't trust physicians anymore. But when you ask them, do you trust your doctor? No one asked that question. Not physicians generic, just your doctor. I still think there's some trust, although we're losing it rapidly. And to your experience in politics, which is one thing that's really concerning me, talking points are nothing more than a bunch of lies with a sliver of truth. So I'll take something that the DNC and the AP have said repeatedly. The Medicaid changes in the adult population is going to hurt children, and children are going to die. That's not true. The evidence does not bear that out. But yes, I've been doing this. I started my residency in 89, and I've seen children die, children get sick since 1989. Whether there's Medicaid or no Medicaid, whatever the federal government does or doesn't do, the unfortunate truth is everybody gets sick and some people die. Whether it's your child, your brother, your mother, your partner. But I think that's just not right to use that kind of language from either side because there's this sliver of truth that, yes, there are people dying. But like you said, there are no studies that show that this intervention or that intervention are the cost to that. People just die. That's just what happens. And it's just sickening that people are using this fear mongering to scare people into voting one way or the other or taking action one way or the other. We should talk about what we know and what we think we know and what we know we don't know.
But sensationalism sells.
That's what he's
That's-
saying. That's why these social media people get all these clickbait. And that's why they're making millions as influencers.
Yeah.
And they're not really helping us have the conversation we need to have. They're just saying this liver truth, like yellow press is just what it'd be called back when people had newspapers. And it's troubling because it only creates a lot of screaming on both sides and not a lot of coming together to see what the real problem is and how we can resolve it together. Because there's 20% of crazies on the left, 20% of crazies on the right. That's never going to change, or 5%, whatever you want. But there's a 60% that, wants to have a partner, wants to raise a family, wants to have a modest home and a nice car, and wants to see their children grow up and hopefully get to the point where they can relax, whether it's at the beach or wherever they want, and do good for their communities and their neighbors and their colleagues. That's a majority of us. And screaming at each other doesn't get us to a good place.
So, Herb, I'm going to agree with you on part of that, and I'm going to push back on the premise on part of that. So, first of all, if what we do doesn't keep people alive, I don't know why I'm not selling insurance, right? Let's look at this last year. We had 3 measles deaths, 2 in children, that were completely preventable. We had the largest number of influenza deaths that we've had in decades, and that was directly tied to a decrease in uptake of the influenza vaccine. Vitamin K, if you turn down vitamin K, your risk of stroke or death from vitamin K-dependent bleeding as a newborn is measurable at 1 to 54 and 1 to 200, right? So I personally, during the COVID pandemic, took care of children who went to the ICU with COVID, many of them quite young. And we saw that plummet, almost disappear entirely once we rolled out the COVID vaccine, at least in people who could be vaccinated. So yes, people die. But if we don't have the power to help fewer people die and fewer people get sick, then I don't know why we do what we do. I firmly believe the data.
That's what's the word we would be looking for? The role of a physician is to have dispensational belief. Remember literature? That you can prevent death. And we get up every day and we put our soldier hats and we go out to stop disease and prevent death. But even ourselves eventually lose that battle.
Oh,
but
eventually.
We don't give up. But we don't give up.
The question is when?
But we don't give up. I don't get up in the morning and say, everybody's going to die. Why treat the pneumonia?
And everyone's a win. But let me come
what
back,
I'm saying
Herb.
is we keep fighting in this circle of, at a scientific level, we understand illness hits everybody. Death hits everybody, sometimes really unfairly. But we strive to save as many people as we can. And when we can't save them, I hope that we at least give them comfort and help them transition from this earth to the next place.
So I am going to agree with one of your other points, Herb, which is that talking about the number of deaths is not the message that works well. That does come off as being alarmist. Now, it's true, but that doesn't make it our best message. So what messages do we know resonate that don't sound like fear-mongering? One of those messages is what we owe each other in a community, which seems surprising because we talk a lot about the loss of community, the loss of communitarianism, the sense that we actually do need to look after each other. But when you look at the data on communications around preventive measures like vaccines, reminding people that we all need to help each other out a little bit actually does really well. And that's a message that we really need to lean into. Another message that we can lean into that works really well is just helping kids thrive and grow up, focusing on what kids will be able to do if they're not sick, if they're not in the intensive care unit, if they're not disabled. We all dream of our kids going to school and playing sports and making friends and having incredible lives and careers and raising families, and helping people remember that vision for their healthy, thriving child. And just a simple thing, varicella vaccine. When I was 14, I was out of school for 2 weeks with varicella, and I can still point to the scars on my body where they got infected and formed deep pits. I know where that is. That was 2 weeks out of life, 2 weeks out of school. And okay, I didn't get cerebritis, right? Varicella didn't kill me. It killed some people. It didn't kill me. It kills almost no one now. But what about those 2 weeks? You can focus on that ability to stay in life, to keep going, to do what you want to do. We know that people with severe COVID, a fair number of them have long COVID. That impacts their ability to do, to perform, to run, to play, to learn, to do what they need to do. We can focus on ability, on what preventive care can do to help your child succeed. The third thing that we need to do is think about how we message about what these things actually do. What is a vaccine? You hear people very excited about, quote, natural immunity, which I call survivor's immunity, because if you get killed, you're not immune. And we vaccinate against things that don't give you a chance to develop naturally.
You don't get sick again too.
That's right. But you're using natural immunity when you immunize somebody. You're teaching the immune system to recognize a thing that it didn't know about before. So this idea of teaching, of downloading antivirus software, but look, it's your kid's immune system. It's them. It's not the vaccine. The vaccine is helping your child's own immune system learn to do a thing it wants to know how to do to keep your child safe. That's very different messaging from, say, a shield or a soldier, right? These violent images, these warlike images do not resonate. They sound scary. They sound bad. But teaching, literacy, antivirus software, learning, reminding parents that, hey, everybody responds differently. Just if I teach you to read or I teach you calculus, some people are going to learn it in a different way than others. Some people are going to get better at it than others. That's all we're doing. And so I think that messaging is really critical. Not just like this many kids are going to die next year if they don't get the vaccine, but your child is going to thrive. You're going to help your community. Your child's immune system is going to get stronger and learn to do something new. Those are the messages we need to be giving.
I think you're right. I think it's a little bit more difficult than that in the sense that, I don't know, we're all doctors, so we've seen so much death and so much illness and so much carnage that I would assume we have a very different perspective of someone that doesn't experience death very frequently, which is most of humanity, right? Most of humanity doesn't see a child die, thank God. So it's, I think, difficult for people to see that as a reality. And what I say, I'm very personal about this. If you don't want to get the HIV vaccine, the pneumococcal vaccine, the polio vaccine, the pertussis vaccine, and the measles vaccine, I don't want you as a client. Nothing personal, but I'm at an age where I want to go to bed after my bourbon and sleep soundly. I don't want to be woken up at 3 a.m. because your kid's in the emergency room being coded because they got meningitis. And it's your kid, it's your choice. You will have to live with the loss. I don't want the call, and I don't want to worry about it. Now, you can debate me on hepatitis B and HPV. Look, I'll be 60 next year. If your kid is a year today, by the time he gets liver cancer, he'll be 40 or 50. I'll be way in the grave or cremated. It won't be my problem. But I can't understand if you can prevent your child from not suffering from cancer, why you would walk away from that. But it's your choice. It's your choice, and I'm not going to see the consequences. I'm not at the end of my career, but I'm in a stage of my career where my patients are certainly 95% or more of them, I hope 99.9% of them are going to outlive me.
You know what?
And
Your message, Dr. Hill, that explained how vaccines work and all that kind of stuff, beautiful. Great message. But I understand it as a physician.
Right.
I, as the parents, don't get it. I just don't get it. They get it as I take something, I get a jab, I don't get a disease. They don't understand. Get immunity, build tolerance to it, reduce the illness in the community so other people don't get sick. They understand, get a jab, don't get a disease. And I got the flu shot yet, I still got the flu. You know, that's the problem. And of late, as of this past week, we got the flu vaccines. You know what? I have never been so unsuccessful in giving the flu vaccines as I was this week. Today I'm at 7. No. And I don't know why. I have no explanation for them.
we know why. We know.
Yeah, you know why.
It's what he said about before. There's two things. There's misinformation on both sides, and then there's the paternalistic, you do as I tell you messaging that does not resonate with these young people. It was bad enough during COVID. Now we have ChatGPT and all these AI bots, right? That you can type in any question, and within 30 seconds, it gives you a half-baked answer. And so now you have to be extremely careful because these young computer native parents, they don't just take what you say like the Bible, the gospel, you're a doctor. They put it into ChatGPT and say, oh, what does the ChatGPT say? And what are they doing in Sweden? And what are they doing in Canada? And why are they doing that? And why is my doctor telling me something different? And
But you know, George, you bring up something that's really critical about understanding some of these vaccines. So we're seeing this idea weaponized against vaccines right now, which is the idea, and this is why the shield metaphor is such a bad metaphor when we talk about vaccines. An imperfect shield is a lousy shield, right? If a shield doesn't stop everything, what's the point of it? It's not very good. But we know that we're talking about an endpoint that's not just I never get flu. The difference is I didn't end up in the ICU. I didn't die. And you mentioned, Herb, our experience of having been there to see things, right? We have seen the children who got pulmonary failure from influenza pneumonia, the children who required surgery because they got empyema as a complication of influenza pneumonia. We saw, but other people have not necessarily seen it. They don't know what that looks like. And we need to remind people that we're hearing this term bandied about in a really misleading way of sterilizing immunity. And the reason that they're saying sterilizing immunity is to play on this idea that I got the flu shot and I still got the flu, so it didn't work. No, that was never the point of the flu shot. The flu shot was to keep you from dying. You didn't go to the intensive care unit. You didn't get intubated. You didn't die. The shot did its job. But you're like, oh, but I still got flu. Yeah, that shot doesn't keep you from getting flu all the time, but it does keep you from dying. The same thing is true of the COVID vaccines. The COVID vaccines don't stop every case of COVID, but we're seeing a lot fewer kids in the ICU.
But here's the problem, right?
Yeah.
And this is where we have to be honest and be data-driven, not anecdotally driven. I am one of the most pro-vaccine people you will find. However, the flu vaccine is, in a bad year, really mediocre. It only prevents 40% of severe disease. So my question is, can't we do better? And I don't think it's going to be a vaccine. It's going to be, there's a product on phase 3 research right now where they're tying an antiviral Beyfortus, but that's a monoclonal, and they tie it up to, and they bind it to an IGF, and it runs around in your body for 6 months, and it prevents mild, moderate, and severe disease 70% of the time. You're basically running around with an antiviral for 6 months.
Wow.
Now, there's questions about, will there be resistance? I worry about the resistance. But
Sure.
but the flu vaccine needs to be better. And then we had a terrible mistake. I don't think it was intentional, but Dr. Fauci is very paternalistic. And the messaging that came out is, if you take the COVID vaccine, you won't get sick. Because the initial studies showed that you weren't getting sick, because when your autoantibodies go up for the first 6 weeks, you really don't get even mild disease. And then they start waning, and then they forgot to say what you said. You're not taking this shot so you don't get a cold. We don't care if you get a cold. We don't try to get a vaccine for rhinovirus. We don't try to get medications for rhinovirus. Get some Kleenex, some tea, and have your wife rub your head. We're done. You'll get better in 3 to 5 days. And so that misstep in messaging is hurting us, because there are people are like, they don't understand the complexity of it.
Yeah.
Oh, this is nonsense. I don't
But
need
Herb,
to
you
think.
really touched on something there, and I want to pick up 2 threads from that. First of all, the humility of not overselling what we're capable of. I think this is one of the reasons the pandemic broke us. People feel like they were promised something that they didn't get. We in medicine saw admissions for COVID drop by 90% and said, we win. But people said, but I still got COVID, just like with flu.
Yeah.
And I still know somebody who got sick from it. So I think we have to be very upfront and very transparent. Say, hey, I don't know how this year's flu vaccine is going to work. In a bad year, it's 40% effective. In a good year, it's 70% effective. That's not perfect. But I do know this. If I can prevent 40 or 70% of hospitalizations and deaths, that's a risk that I am delighted to take. Be honest about it up front, right? Second of all, in terms of how the vaccine works, as well as I do how the capsids get rearranged in flu, it's a Rubik's Cube. It's a hard thing to chase down. But you also mentioned the Beyfortus, our ability to just empty the pediatric floors last winter of RSV. That was incredible. As a pediatric hospitalist,
that's not a vaccine, though.
No, but the maternal vaccine worked just as well. So when you gave mom the RSV vaccine, so that is a vaccine.
Yes.
But this antibody was spectacular. And man, it's going to be tragic if we get to this year and people don't want that. Because we had a year where RSV admissions, where I was working, went through the floor. They just plummeted.
Oh, no, I think people want it.
That's not right.
That was one vaccine that was so easy to give. People all wanted it. I don't know if it was because not everybody could get it, the insurance, the expense, the shortage. I learned one thing over time. If you want to give people vaccines, find a disease, create a shortage, or make it really expensive and hard to get, and then people will bang your door down. Hence, it happened with COVID, right, at the beginning.
Yeah.
They stratified who can get it, who couldn't get it. Then when you make it easily available, people don't want it. It happened with the H1N1 back then. You couldn't find it. People were begging us to give it to them.
So one thing I think doctors would do well to learn is the 6 principles of persuasion. And this, every first year marketing and advertising student learns this on the second day of class, maybe the first day. But one of them is scarcity. So you bring up a really good point, George. When something is scarce, people rush to get it. You'll notice this if you're at the car dealership or anywhere else. It's the last one, right? We're almost out. You better strike now. I'm not sure we can do this for you tomorrow,
You
right?
do that with the PlayStation, anything that's Apple.
Yeah, they're going to run out.
You do that with marriage. You don't want to be so old. No woman wants to marry you.
On the other hand,
are we going to find a woman for Herb?
Yeah, that ship's
Herb
sailed.
is a single guy. We got to find him a mate.
Wrightsville Beach. That's what I recommend. Just walk around the loop, and certainly you'll bump into somebody, Herb. The problem with public health is scarcity is the opposite of good public health. Ideally, you'd get 100% of people covered. So it's hard. I wish we could have a going out of business sale for MMR vaccine and then have, but we did see a bump when people started to actually get basals. So we did see some of that. We had a ton of parents inquiring, can I get it early? Do I have to wait to 12 months? Right? We're going to be traveling. What should we do? So suddenly there was a sense of there's an emergency here. There's a scarcity. Maybe I won't be able to get it. And honestly, with some of the changes happening at the CDC and the ACIP, I'm feeling like there may be a real sense of scarcity. So if I were waiting around, if I were on the fence, I would get it while I still can, whatever it is.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about that, because I think we have to differentiate politics, advocacy, and science. They're not the same. They intertwine, and the difficulty for the American citizen is that we have freedom of speech and freedom of press, and the government is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So it makes public policy, particularly public health policy, very complicated. If you're in Cuba and you're test positive for HIV, they put you in a sanatorium for the rest of your life, so you can't infect anybody else on the island. Very effective. But I don't think that any of us would want to live under that system.
But you know what? I'm going to give you a little pushback. PrEP is more effective than jailing people after they've spread HIV to some people, right?
Yeah,
we now have, thanks to science, thanks to our free society and the investment we were making until recently in our scientific endeavors and in our public health endeavors, PrEP for everyone. Now, that is actually a great example, because that is one of the public health measures that has been endangered because of politics. We are going to see millions of people die of preventable HIV.
In Cuba, there's not money for PrEP. So they're not going to give you that option. It's just not going to happen. And you can't go into the free market and get it because it's not available. So there's some blessings of being in a free society, and there's some sacrifice that you have to do in a free society. It's more messy. As far as ACIP, this has been a total political fight, not a science, not a medicine. This is only politics. And honestly, there are some people, many amongst our pediatrician colleagues, who are still upset that Trump is president, that Secretary Kennedy is at HHS. And you have a right to be upset. You can have whatever opinion you have. But this is a constitution. The guy got elected. He gets to appoint whoever he wants. The Senate confirmed him. You can like him, you cannot like him, you have to deal with him for 2 years, 4 years, or till he gets impeached. I don't know. Or he dies. I don't know. But that's just the way it is. But I don't think that we do much. I think we do more harm than good when we walk away from the table and refuse to talk to people that we find unworthy of our time, because they are not one of us, which is what the AP did. They walked away from the liaison position at the ACIP. So they lost their ability to at least be in the room. And when you're not invited to the dinner, you're on the menu. And that was a tragic, tactical mistake. Not even a communication mistake, that's just tactical. When you're in a position of leadership, you have to engage people that you may find abhorrent, with whom you would never share dinner or bring to your house. But if you take the mantle of leadership, you have to put up with a lot of poop at the table, because that's what you signed up for. So when you're a diplomat and you're assigned to the Russian embassy in Moscow, you may not like the Russians, you may not like what Putin does, but you signed up to work for the Foreign Service. You are assigned there. You do the best job you do for the government that you represent. And that's what you need to do. But walking away from the table and walking away from the conversation in these very important issues, which are more political than science, does not serve us well. It doesn't serve us well to have an alternative vaccination schedule. And to say, which is the same thing that we accuse the other side of saying, that they are anti-science because they don't agree with our point of view. And that public health in America today can't be trusted because already the MAGA Republicans don't trust public health. And now we're telling the liberal Democrats, don't trust public health. So who's going to trust us in the exam room when I tell them, but the CDC says, and the AP says, I shouldn't trust the CDC. No, but you should. They're not always wrong. No, they tell me, they're telling me not to trust them. Why should I take the flu shot? Why should I take any shot? I shouldn't trust anybody. That's not the message. And that's not going to get us to get people to take the shots and do good for their kids.
Herb, I want to probe on that a little bit. First of all, I am in no position to speak on P policy. I don't make the policy, and I'm not speaking on their behalf on policy. But
I understand.
I am interested in your perspective here. And so let me go back to the science, as you say we should. Does the science demonstrate that the COVID vaccine is safe and effective for children ages 6 months to 12 months?
What do you mean by safe and effective? You just talked about the shield.
No, I talked about not talking about the shield.
No, but you talked, when we talk about that's
your
one
understanding of the data available
no,
for the COVID vaccine.
No vaccine is safe and effective.
But the benefits outweigh the risk.
The benefits outweigh the risk.
So that's what I mean. When I mean safe and effective, do the benefits outweigh the risks?
Okay,
are more children?
The language is very important. You understand that, right? Because when I tell you it's safe and effective, you might think in your mind as a parent, my kid's never going to get COVID.
It's 100% effective and 100% safe. I got that. Okay, thank you for that. Communicating with transparency.
Okay, and
do
then
you
we
believe that on net, the benefits of the COVID vaccine from age 6 to 12 months are significantly greater than the risks?
It depends.
It depends on what?
It depends on whether you already had COVID. At what age did you have COVID? So if you had COVID at 2 months, you probably can't mount a significant response, and you would benefit from a primary series.
Okay.
But if you had COVID at 5 months, then it's a conversation with the parent, because I really don't know, because the CDC hasn't given us the data.
I'm not sure the data exists, but let's say for the overall population.
They didn't do the study.
Presuming
they're lazy.
Most 6-month-olds have not had COVID.
Huh?
Presuming most 6-month-olds have not had COVID,
I don't think you can say that.
An adequate response.
Because if you look at the data, the highest risk for COVID hospitalization are under 6 months. When you look at the trend that Dr. Havers put that she was going to present to the ACIP, there's almost no COVID hospitalizations between the age of 6 months to 17 years of age anymore. The trend is going down. And so the highest risk is less than 6 months. And a lot of these kids and COVID is not like influenza or RSV or parainfluenza. Remember, some of these parainfluenza viruses they only show up in odd years. There is no seasonal trend to that. It can happen anytime during the year. So you may very well have COVID before you reach the age of 6 months. And so then I'm going back to what you said. The conversation can't be paternalistic, can't be dogmatic, can't be a talking point from the Biden administration of shots in your arms if you're a patriot. End of discussion. It has to be, okay, here's what I know. I did see your kid when he was 4 months. They had COVID. I think natural immunity is pretty strong. I think Dr. Paul Offit says natural immunity is pretty strong for those cytotoxic T cells, prevents you from landing in the hospital. I don't see a lot of downside in giving you 2 shots of COVID. How do you feel?
So that's a conversation, physician-patient conversation.
Sure.
How do you feel about it? And if you tell me, no, I'm going to pass doc, I'm like, okay, let's talk about the pertussis, because I really do worry about the pertussis, because that's a nasty disease too. That I really want to push on. So see the nuances? And then there is data, there's very good data that boosting kids every year does not decrease hospitalization. And that's why the ACIP in 2021 recommended that only people over the age of 64 get a booster shot every year. And Rachel Walensky was pressured by the Biden White House and by Tony Fauci to relent as a CDC director, which is her prerogative. This is an advisory board, and only a person that has been approved by the Senate, a superior officer, can make those choices for the U.S. citizens. And she said, I disagree. Everybody gets a booster. And that's what happened. So
wrapping up, because we've only got 5 minutes left. How would you have communicated with the ACIP if you were the AP and felt the data supported keeping the vaccine on the schedule at 6 to 12 months, and you had to walk into this potentially hostile ACIP, including some members who, by report, may not be particularly that well versed in medicine or vaccine science?
And they don't like vaccines.
So how would you have, what would your messaging have been?
I would have to take a friend and a stiff shot of whiskey. And I would have walked in there and I would have done what the Europeans did when they came to visit Trump with Zelensky. And I would been a brown noser and I would have tried to charm my way into telling them, you know what? You're not so wrong. Shared decision making makes a lot of sense for most people, because there are going to be some people, if you're on a kidney transplant list and you're 12, give that kid a shot every 3 months, because if he happens to have COVID in the nose, the day that this kidney comes about that he could use, that day ain't going to come back again. Now, that's not science. I can't show you that's the way you're supposed to do it, but that sounds pretty reasonable to me. But what I would ask you to do is, one, let's be supportive if a child has not had COVID before the age of 6 months, to strongly offer the parents the opportunity to get the vaccine.
Yeah, the physician-patient relationship is important, Herb, stop. But sometimes the patients, they don't know. How many people, is that a mandatory vaccine? Oh, if it's not mandatory, I don't want it. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I believe a lot in vaccines, but I think a good conversation, I usually flip the patients to take their vaccines. I never say the word safe and effective. I usually use the benefits outweigh the risk. Give you an example. Just this past week, I had 2 kids that had the Tdap in the arms, and the arms were swollen, red, really big and painful. Now, that's not a big deal to you guys and to me as a physician, but do you think that parent thinks that this Tdap is safe and effective?
No, that's why you don't use those words. That's why they're miracle drugs, but they have side effects, and they're not going to always prevent you from getting sick. That's the reality of any intervention that we do, and we can only deal with.
They have to go take a shot, prevent something. Take a shot, don't have a bad outcome. You know, there's like a happy grounded discussion or a middle ground.
In the room with the ACIP, I would also have said, let's work on the data on when to vaccinate moms with COVID, because that's a twofold problem. One, pregnant women are at higher risk from complications from COVID. So they should get the COVID vaccine as soon as they know they're pregnant. But we know that the immunity wanes. So if you get the vaccine at 4 weeks or 8 weeks, that's not the antibodies are not going to be high enough. That's why we get the RSV vaccine at 32 weeks. So that the antibodies are high when the baby's born. So let's do the studies of, we give the vaccine to the moms at 8 weeks and 32 weeks. Does that prevent a lot of these ICU admissions on the kids under 6 months? Show me the data so I can explain it to the parents.
So do you think the people in that room, Herb, if you had that conversation, how receptive do you think they would have been to it?
We don't know, because we didn't have the conversation. For all we know, they would have said no. But at least we had the conversation. And it would have been an afternoon of my life that I tried to do good. And
Well,
I didn't win. But that's okay. It was just one afternoon of my life. I'll try next week.
I think the good news for us is as long as we stay in pediatrics, we get to have these conversations every day with lots of people and bring our expertise at listening, at humility, at communicating effectively to those conversations. And we know that when we do that, we save lives.
I
agree.
agree with you, but I would like, and you're in a tough position because you're inside the AAP a lot, but you don't make policy for them. But I really honestly, truly wish the executive committee listened to you and that it would be a more nuanced message and a less paternalistic message and a message that's more inclusive where we meet people where they are. 90% of people today, right now, don't want their kids to get a COVID vaccine. That's a tremendous communications challenge. And by walking away from the table and not having the difficult conversations and not being honest about what we know and what we don't know, and this is a very young disease. It's been around for 5 years. And we've been around, Jesus was here 2,026 years ago. And there was thousands of years before that. And so we can't be on the news saying our recommendations are rooted in decades of peer-reviewed science by the nation's leading health experts, because people are rightly going to jump and say 5 Pinocchios. COVID's been around for 5 years. What are you talking about?
Well,
Do you know
Turn
what I'm
around.
saying? That we
Well-
need to use what you're saying. Meet the parents where they are, be a little nuanced, be understanding everybody has a different perspective, and be very intentional with the words and don't disengage, because this is not science. This is strategy and politics, and it's a whole different game. And most of us as physicians, we're not trained as communicators. We're not politicians. And it is a place where we are out of our place.
you just summarized my mission to train all of our peers as communicators. Guys, I cannot thank you enough for having me on again.
Yeah.
It's been
Oh,
an
thank you.
incredibly incredible pleasure to get to talk with you.
All
Best of luck in Seattle. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much. Be well.
You too.
Thank you for listening. This has been a production of the Pediatric Lounge. On the show notes, you will find links to our co-host and other important notes, as well as a timetable of the topics discussed today. Don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcast. Leave us a great review, as it helps us greatly. In the meantime, we will see you next week. The Pediatric Lounge. The conversations are not intended as medical advice, and the opinions expressed are solely those of the host and the guest.